Welcome to Wild, Wise and Whole, a podcast for women ready to reconnect with their bodies, reclaim their power and embrace their truth. I'm your host, Lydia, a somatic psychotherapist, trauma release breathwork facilitator and embodiment coach, and I'm also a woman just like you. This show dives deep into the wisdom of the feminine body and the art of living authentically. Through conversations on somatics, nervous system healing, trauma recovery, cyclical living, feminine leadership, all of the beautiful things related to being wild, wise and whole as a woman, we are going to be exploring what those topics mean in today's world and how we get to embody them. So whether you're navigating burnout, you're seeking alignment, or you're stepping into your power, this podcast is your space to heal, expand and thrive. Let's settle in. And I hope you enjoy listening to heartfelt stories, figuring out practical tools, and listening to transformative discussions that help you reconnect with your rhythms, lead with your feminine energy, and live a life rooted in truth and wholeness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast Wild, Wise and Whole. Thank you for joining me again. So this episode is going to be a really nice episode actually. I'm going to be sharing some reflections that I have from the last year. Obviously I stepped into doing a lot of my own, trauma healing work, a lot of somatic work, a lot of embodiment work, a lot of nervous system work, and that kind of came as a result of two quite significant experiences that I had, and one of those was quite traumatic for my body, and it just really opened the gateway into this work and the woman I've become, and all of these, and the practitioner I've become, like all of these amazing things that I'm kind of like landing in my life now have definitely been a result of those choices and those actions that I made last year, and how I chose to show up kind of like in the aftermath of those experiences that I had. So I just thought I would share some reflections and share some things that I wish like Lydia in 2024 knew. And also for anyone listening to this, like if you've experienced something that's difficult or even traumatic, it's like you may listen to this podcast episode and actually it might just give you like some hope for like what's on the other side, if you're still in like the thick of things, or you're still struggling, or even if like you haven't yet quite stepped into receiving support around like those things that you're suppressing, or those things that like you need support for. Like maybe you're noticing the patterns, the way that they block you, the fact that you suppress everything. Like this podcast may serve as like just like a hug, and just like a gentle tap on the back that it's okay to move through the things that you're experiencing. Like it might feel scary now, but like if you move through it, it's almost like a credit to what could be waiting for you on the other side of doing, the work that you potentially need to do, or you want to do, but that you're avoiding or you're putting off. So yes, it just feels really nice. And I recently had, on the 24th of December, my 1 year, you could call it anniversary, but I don't really like that word, but I guess it is. I had the 1 year anniversary of my traumatic experience. And for me, that week leading up to the Friday was it was just like a reconfirmation of like the body really does keep the score. And it's interesting because even though I spent so long like processing and like being in therapy and somatically moving through these things and working on my nervous system to get back to a space that feels safe in my body, like I was so intrigued to just sit with the way that the imprint of that trauma was showing up in my body. And thank God I was, one, self-aware enough to notice that, but then two, had like resources in place to be able to like help me with those couple of days, because I think if you're not aware of that, like it must be so difficult. And even like for me, who's been doing so much consistent work, for it to still come up the way that it did was like, it was just wild to notice, to be honest, like how much my body just like flared up, and how much my body was really like, it knew, like it really, really knew that the anniversary was coming. So I felt absolutely fine. And then I think it was on like the Monday I woke up and I just started to notice like these subtle symptoms start to arise. Like I didn't want to get out of bed. I noticed I was quite like shut down. I didn't have like the same level of capacity, but it didn't really feel like very noticeable on the Monday. And then by the time the Tuesday rolled around and I woke up, I was like, I just wanted to stay in bed hidden with like a hoodie on under the quilt, and I didn't want to get out of bed, and I didn't want to do anything, and I was very, very like in my shutdown in my nervous system. And I noticed I was zoning out a lot more. I noticed I was actively like choosing to distance myself from practices that I knew would have made me feel good, because it just felt overwhelming, you know, like it felt, I just had this sense that what I was feeling, if I dropped into it and I sat with it, like I knew it was going to overwhelm me. And it was just like this felt sense in my body, like I could almost feel the energy like stuck in my chest and my throat, like it wanted to come out, like I could feel it in my body. But then I was zoning out a lot more because I didn't really want to be with it, and I was like, this is so fascinating. And then I think I woke up on like the Wednesday, yeah, it must have been the Wednesday, and I was just flooded with inflammation. Like my knees were sore, my ankles were sore, my toes were swollen, my pelvis was uncomfortable, my lower back was aching. I felt like completely out of alignment with my pelvis, and I just felt like so drained of energy. Like I felt like I was literally back in shutdown last year, like the same level of inflammation, you know, like my stomach was bloating, I was like fatigued, like it was almost like I hadn't slept, I was so fatigued. And I woke up that morning and I was like, wow, it just hit me like a train that this is how I felt for like so many days of 2024. And it just reminded me like how thankful I am that I done the work, because I even went on Instagram and spoke about this, and I was like, to live like this is so much harder than going through the, like I would choose to sit in the pain of all those therapy sessions and to hit the burnout and to like do the hard work that I needed to last year to get here, because the 3 hours that I'd been awake was a slog. It was so unbelievably hard to just almost like function, right? And I also noticed in my sleep that night that I was tensing my jaw, my shoulders were really raised, like I had my hands in fists, and these were just all signs that there was stress in my system, right? Like the cortisol was flooding again, the adrenaline was flooding again. So like even when I'm getting sleep, because I was so like active with that cortisol in my body and that stress hormone, which an indicator that I was clenching my jaw, and I was waking up with jaw ache, my shoulders were up, I kind of come out my sleep enough to notice that was an indication that even in the night I'm not getting the rest and recharge that I need, because there's something like actively going on in my nervous system. So then when you wake up in the morning, this is why you have fatigue when you're dysregulated, because you're not getting the rest that you need, because under the surface there's still that stress hormone that's kind of flushing your body. And your body knows that, right? Like it's not like it completely turns off when you go to sleep. Your nervous system is still active when you go to sleep, and your body is still active when you go to sleep. So that was like fascinating. When I woke up on the Wednesday, I was like, oh my God, like it knows, like my body remembers, and it knows that this anniversary is coming up. And then what was so interesting is like on the Friday when the anniversary actually was, I felt okay. Like I just felt like it was the build up and like the anticipation that was making my body quite dysregulated, and I knew I was dysregulated, you know, and I knew I was like distancing myself from practices. But thank God I had that therapy session with Matt on Friday, so I'd already put things in place for that Friday in terms of support. So again, I think this is something really nice when you do this work is that you're able to really be there for yourself, because you're able to put things in place that are going to be resourceful for your body, for your heart, for your nervous system. So I had a session with Matt. Turned out to be an incredible session, like profound session. Even after a year, right, like even after a year of having consistent bi-weekly sessions, it still amazes me that I can go into a session and I can have the sessions that I do and I can come out feeling the way that I do. And again, I just think like testament to this work and like the layers of self that just continue to unfold. And also when you choose to do like deeper long-term work with someone, like when you build that relationship with the practitioner, but also when you build the relationship with the modality that you're using. So the trauma release breathwork that I'm trained in, and that's what Matt uses with me. So I go in and have those trauma release breathwork sessions, and I have been doing now for over a year consistently. And it still amazes me that shifts occur. It still amazes me that I am presented with versions of myself that I never even knew were there. It still amazes me that I can tap into and access energy that feels like I could move mountains in my body with it. Like it's wild. But that turned out to be like such a deeply powerful session, like so much permission and so much like, me and Matt just had this really beautiful moment. I was talking about actually how the trauma for me feels like, because it led me on this journey, it also led me to accessing so much of my feminine power. Like the gifts that this trauma gave me, now I can see on the other side. It makes the trauma seem so irrelevant and insignificant. And I know that's not the case for everyone, so that's why I do just want to premise and say, like, you don't have to find a silver lining in your trauma. You don't have to feel like there's gifts that you received in your trauma or an experience that was difficult for you, right? I truly believe, for me, and this is what like me and Matt got emotional over, like I feel like that trauma that I experienced was an initiation. I feel like I had to experience that in order to become the woman who I am now. And I feel like I had to go to the depths of myself last year and continue to show up in order to be and become this woman that I'm becoming now. And when I was just like in session with Matt, I said to him, like, I almost feel like if I am to step in and own the power that I feel after that experience, like that scares me, because it feels like the world becomes limitless, right? And I think when you have so much like safety in yourself, in your body, in your life, like it's like this unwavering like faith, right? And that's coming from you, like, to feel that and know that's not coming from a relationship, that's not coming from anything external, that's not coming from permission slips around what you look like, how much money you make. When you feel that in your your human body, when you feel that energy, it almost takes your breath away. And it is scary, because I personally feel like anything I want to do, I can fucking do it. And I can step into that now, and I can do that. And I've said this, and I've, said I believe this for years now. I never believed it. I never ever truly believed that. And my body was never on board with that. Now my body's on board with that. Like, I feel the rush of energy right now as I'm doing this podcast recording. Like, I feel it in my chest. And it makes me want to take a breath, because it's like, it's phenomenal. Like, it's phenomenal to feel that level of like safety, and to feel that level of self-acceptance, and to feel that level of like power. And I think also the other thing linking to like that felt scary about the power is the impact. So how visible I can become, and what I can do with this work, and where I can go with this work, and the women that I can help. Like, that, for an instant, it felt scary, right? Because it's like, you're looking at yourself in the mirror, and like, it's like, how much can you hold? Like, who is it that you want to become? Like, do you want to follow the thread of what you've awakened, and do you truly want to step in and own the sheer level of power that you have? And it's so interesting because throughout last year, Matt would always say to me, like, you know, you're so powerful, like all of these things, and you don't believe it, like, or I never believed it. And I was like, right, I know there's a part of me that's powerful. And then again, it's like that question of like, what does that even mean when we think about our feminine power, right? And it can mean different things to different people. But for me, for sure, I was like, what does that mean for me to be a powerful woman? Because I already felt like in many ways I was powerful, but fuck, I wasn't. I really wasn't. I was playing small in so many ways. I was self-abandoning, I was self-sacrificing, like I was powerful in like bits and bobs in certain ways, but like I did not access or own my power at all, because I wasn't truly connected to my body and I wasn't truly connected to myself. And that for me feels and felt like the gateway into really, really feeling my true feminine power. And I definitely feel like the Kundalini energy awakening also has like awakened this other like Shakti energy in me, like this sensual, like sexual energy. And I think to own your sexual energy as a woman is fucking powerful, to like, because you also like let go of not just the cage that you have for yourself, right, but like you also let go of the cage that society has put you in. Like you let go of the patriarchy in many, many ways. You let go of how society tells you should be. You let go of all of these kind of spoken and unspoken conditions that are on us as women. And for you to feel, or for me personally to feel like I have that level of like control and freedom in my life, that was scary and confronting to sit with. And I kind of was just like talking through these things in session, and I said like, I feel like there's a part of me that is scared to own my power. And I feel like when I think about owning that, it makes the trauma so fucking insignificant. It makes everything I experienced for those years insignificant. It makes what happened to me last January so insignificant. Like I don't give a fuck about it. And I just like opened my eyes, and Matt was like really emotional, and he was like, oh my god, like you've got it, like this is an initiation for you. And like we just both like, we had this lovely hug, and he was like, Lydia, I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy to witness you in this. And instantly like my whole body started coming alive, like from my spine, like the energy started moving up my body, right? And I was like, I'm gonna own all of this. And I think I had to like work through that block, because when I went to the session last week with Matt, like I was still holding on to a lot of shame around decisions and actions and the way that I behaved after what happened to me, and it didn't fit the narrative that I had in my head, or society tells you that it should be, you know, when you experience something that's traumatic. But obviously there's so many complexities to my story, which I've spent, you know, a year in therapy unraveling and talking about, and getting to this point where I can let go of my shame. And it was just so interesting to literally, as soon as I had that acknowledgement that like I'm in an initiation and my body awakened, I was like, the shame is gone. Like I don't feel the shame. And I said to Matt, because no one can shame me. Like I'm not gonna let anybody shame me for like what I done or how I behaved, because you don't know what it's like unless you know what that's like. And this is what I was saying to Matt. I was like, I'm not gonna let anybody judge me. I'm not gonna let a single fucking person make me feel small again. I'm not gonna let anybody make me feel shameful. And these are most importantly like myself, right? Like I am not going to shame myself for what unfolded last year. And I cannot tell you how that felt in my body to kind of like let go of that, but like feel like I was letting go of that, because I was just like, everything had to unfold the way it had to unfold to get me here. So it almost became like a further journey and initiation that I had to go on after these significant events occurred, to work on the deepest core wounds that I had. And I didn't know that I had them, obviously, until that trauma happened to me. And I had to battle against myself every single day in 2024 to break these like ingrained cycles and patterns that I had, relating to like little Lydia and relating to like teenage self. And honestly, the shit I've moved through last year is fucking wild, and hopefully someday, I'll be able to talk about it, and I'll feel comfortable to talk about it, because there's so much that I hold space for in other women and in client sessions that I have, and I'm like, I know, because I've been through it. And so many women are like, wow, I never knew that. And I'm like, well, of course you never, right? But I feel like there's a shackle of shame that keeps us so small, and a lot of the time that's like self-shame. And I feel like since that session, I have been a totally different woman. I have owned and I have taken up all of my power, and I know and I feel it in my body, in my nervous system, in my tissues, in my heart, in my spirit, in my soul, in my wild woman self, that like, I am not going to self-sacrifice, shame, or abandon myself again. Like, I am not going to do that. And that links out to even like finding another relationship, calling in the person that I want to be with, what my life looks like how I want my business to be, the impact that I want to have, where I want to take it, like just all of these things that like we question as women. And we can question as women, especially as we transition into our 30s, we can almost feel like in some way we have to self-sacrifice because we're on a timer, but the reality is you don't. And this journey that I've been on throughout the past year has honestly just been like phenomenal. Like, if I could bottle this journey, like I could write a book. And me and Matt were saying that the other day, is like, well, Matt actually said to me, he's like, I think you should write a book. And that's really interesting, because when I had the Kundalini awakening, she brought me a vision of a book in my dreams one night, and I could see the title of the book, I could see the chapters of the book, and I have that started on my Google Drive, which is interesting. So yeah, when he said last week you could write a book from this, I was like, it's interesting that you say that, because Kundalini brought me that. And the book that I saw that I was going to write, and I am going to write, is all of the chapters are like the themes that I had to work through last year, from like a nervous system level up. And I just think to be in a space where like I just feel so safe in like myself, my life, my desires, my dreams, like my voice, my needs, like it's phenomenal, like I just want every woman to experience that. And just also how beautiful to experience that after the trauma came. I just think that's a nice kind of, well, it's more than nice, it's profound. So I'm gonna jump into like 3 of the biggest reflections that I have from the last year. I think the first one is like, you have to work to make things feel safe in your nervous system and your body. Like, bringing body-based healing into any self-development work that you are doing is absolutely crucial and fundamental, because so many things I was able to repattern from unsafe to safe has literally transformed my life, and has broken cycles that I had for decades. Like, I say this, right? I'm not saying this lightly. Like, I had ingrained patterns in me. Some of them I didn't know. Some of the behaviours I didn't know. And it was only when I was doing the work with Matt that I was able to see and acknowledge that so much of what I was doing was geared towards keeping me safe. So even though it caused me pain, even though I felt uncomfortable, even though I didn't necessarily like it. And I'm not just talking about last year, I'm talking about, you know, the last 10 years of my life, even though I didn't like doing these things. And that could be as small as getting momentum in my business and then falling off that to like my business never like grew past a certain point. Like I would almost self-sabotage, and it was because it felt unsafe. So if there are patterns and things that cause you distress and discomfort, a reflection and a lesson that I got from last year is you have to work with that from a nervous system level up, because the piece actually is repatterning and recreating new patterns and behaviours that feel safe. If something feels safe but on the surface it causes you discomfort, you are going to keep doing that, which is wild and which is frustrating and which can cause like so many other things to arise, right, to look at that. But one of the things that I had to do last year was I had to notice where I was almost on autopilot. I was almost on autopilot, repeating the same shit and doing the same shit because it felt safer than the alternative. It felt safer than XYZ. And sometimes that in itself would cause me so much pain and so much discomfort to notice that in myself. But I just had to keep showing up with faith, and I just had to keep knowing that the work that I was doing, I was going to change it, right? Because I could see it happening in small, like little bite-sized moments. And I say this to clients, is like sometimes when you do the nervous system work, especially if it's like core wounds, right? Like especially if it's things that have been so ingrained and things that feel so safe for your body, no matter how painful they are. I said sometimes it can feel like you're running into a wall and you get up and you keep running back into that wall and you question, why the fuck do I keep running back into this wall? It's painful, it hurts, I know that it's not going to get me anywhere, so why do I keep doing that, right? But I say to clients, one day you're going to get up from that and you're not going to run back into the wall. You're going to be, that's painful, like I'm not going to do that again, so what can I go and choose to do? And I see it in so many people around me. I see it in so many things with clients. I see it in so many patterns with people around me, conversations I have, and it's just so clear to me now when like there's an attachment or there's like a somatic attachment that is causing us or you to repeat something and to keep going back into something. So like anytime, it could be as simple as like I was in dance yesterday and one of the girls was saying that she hates like feeling her emotions. In my mind, I'm thinking it feels unsafe, so now you have to make it safe to start to feel them, you know, like certain types of partners that we call in, like there's an element, and I'm not saying we're to blame for the people that we call in, by the way, but if it feels safer for you, for example, to attract someone who's emotionally avoidant, no matter how much you're desiring someone who is emotionally available, right? If you have a somatic attachment or if you have a pattern in your nervous system where it feels safer to be with someone who is emotionally avoidant, you will continue to look for that and you will continue to find safety in that pattern and that behaviour. If you don't like do the nervous system work. So that was one of my biggest takeaways last year. Like that was profound. That caused a lot of looking at self. That caused a lot of uncomfortable self-reflection. That caused a lot of pain. It caused a lot of discomfort. It caused a lot of unsafety. It caused a lot of fear. It caused a lot of shutdown, dysregulation in my nervous system. It made me feel helpless a lot of the time, but I kept showing up. And I kept showing up and I kept doing the practices, and I knew that I would get to the other side of it because I believe in these modalities, which is why I trained in them last year. I was like, I really want to train in the breath work because it's been profound for me on my journey. And I knew that if I just kept being in space with Matt, using the tools and the techniques that I knew worked, then and showing up for myself, then I would change all of those things. And I did. And that's why I'm where I'm at now. And I have safety on so many like levels with myself. I have safety with like money, business, future, partners, everything, pretty much like so many things that you can think of that used to trigger fear in me and used to trigger anxiety in me. They no longer do, because I just feel so like secure and I feel so safe. So that's the first biggest reflection. Like, please consider doing nervous system somatic work if you're really looking to like break some of these ingrained cycles, and also really like move through those experiences that you've had. And then the other thing I think is a big reflection is like patience. And I know this might sound like a simple one, but I think for me last year, going slowly and just showing up. Like, I had no time limit. I had no big sexy goals. I just said to Matt, I don't want what happened to me to define me. I don't know how long that's going to take. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm just going to keep showing up. And that's what I did. And even when I didn't want to show up, I went to those sessions. And my therapy was a non-negotiable for me. So I made sure no matter what I had going on, I had that money, or I made that money to be able to be in therapy, because I knew if that wasn't important to me, it could, on the days when I didn't want to show up, I could easily put it into something else. I could easily avoid it. I could easily make excuses. Oh, I don't want to spend X amount a month on this, Oh, I'm trying to move out. I should be saving that money and putting that money in my savings. And I saw it as like something that was a non-negotiable for me. And I had patience. I didn't question how long it would take. I didn't have a time goal by I want to feel this way by this way. I just had patience, because I think you need to have that when you're doing this level of work with yourself, because the minute you start coming in with self-judgments, like, that's not going to feel good in your nervous system, and that's not going to feel good in your body. And actually, that's like the opposite, right, of self-compassion. It's the opposite of self-love. And I also feel like sometimes it's so much easier for us to stay in the victim mentality. And essentially that is also being in a shutdown space in our nervous system. Like, it's so easy to let the things that happen to us make up and determine who we become. And I knew if I didn't get into sessions with Matt, I knew that trauma would be like the epicenter of who I was in my life, and I just build myself back up around that. Like, I knew if I didn't face it, I might get quote unquote, I might be fine in a couple of months, but I wouldn't have been fine. I would have just built Lydia back up around this big like solid mass of emotions and disconnection and trauma and everything that happened to me. So that's why I made the decision, because I also know after we experience things from a nervous system level, it can be like, well, I don't really feel ready to go into that, or I actually don't, like, now's not the time for me to go into that. So we can like really make these excuses, but then also we can become quite stuck in like, this happened to me, so this is why I feel this way. And we can almost feel like helpless to change in that. And again, that's very shut down in your nervous system, right? But I knew that I didn't want that to define me. I knew I don't want my heart to be closed over. I don't want to be like, I hate men. I don't want to be walking around with the weight of this experience in my body and in my heart and in my soul forever. So like, that's one of the other reasons why I was just like, I showed up for myself and I was patient with myself, because there's power and there's choice and there's hope that comes when you step into like difficult work, right? When you step into being like, I'm gonna rediscover who I am again after I've experienced something difficult, and to not let, and even if that's like grief of a parent or grief of like a loved one, right? Like, I see it with my family members, how they've changed since my nana passed, and how that grief is almost like taken so much away from them that they almost like justify that. And I'm just like, but you're losing so much and you actually don't have to. Like, your grief doesn't mean that you have to become completely closed off and bitter. Like, losing my nan doesn't mean that Christmas has to completely fall apart and everybody hates it, but I also know everyone's on their own journeys, right? And I do appreciate that, but I just think like the things that we go through, like they don't have to have like a tight hold over us forever. And this also is why it's really important to find practitioners who understand this work and understand that like slowly is super important, because at no point last year was about going hard or fast, because it's important to acknowledge all the phases of moving through something. It's so important to acknowledge the pain, the fear, the discomfort, the avoidance, the wanting to run away and hide. And this is what is like so profound about the work that myself and Matt done. And also now when I because that was such like a mentorship for me as well, so now when I work with clients, I'm like, we bring in all these parts of self, but at the core of that, what we're also connecting you back to is like your womanness, right? Like the adult woman version of you who's able to be there and tend to all these parts. It's like part work, if you've ever heard of that. And part work is so profound in trauma healing, and it's so profound, I think, in any healing work. So that even when I was bringing like the fear and the sadness in, or even when I felt like completely and utterly burnt out and like I'd had enough, I was able, even if it was like 5% of me, I was able to connect to like that Lydia, that woman, and I was able to just like give myself what I needed in that moment. And even if I didn't know what that was, I had kind of sessions with Matt, I had monthly massages, I had snugs off Ceci, like I knew the things that even if I was like, right, okay, I feel so overwhelmed, I don't actually know in this moment what I need, but I'm self-aware enough to know that this and this makes me feel better on the whole. So I think like patience is so important, because we also live in an Instagram world where it's like everything is hard and fast, and it's like heal your trauma in like 2 days, or like go to this breath work and like go into catharsis and come out your body and have almost like this psychedelic experience where you're completely just kind of like disconnected from yourself. And I think actually what was profound for me was like being able to be beside myself in the whole of that process last year, and like being able to just like really meet these uncomfortable like shadow parts of me and integrate them, and then also to be seen in them, right? Like that's the other thing, is like if I was getting impatient and I was trying to like push past the moments that I only got from the slowness and the patience and the presence and the relationship that we formed, it's like I know for a fact I wouldn't be who I am now, because to be seen in my shadow part and to see myself, but to also be really seen by Matt in that, and to take that into session and be that vulnerable is like, it's hard, but it like teaches you so much. And that's like, I love all parts of me now, like even the parts of me last year who at times I was like, what are you fucking doing? Like I look back now and I'm just like I love you so much, and like I'm gonna bring you at like I acknowledge you, and like you're as much a part of the process as like the powerful me is now. Like you helped me become the woman that I am, and I think that's so big as well for like releasing shame and just like self-love for yourself, right? Is like even loving the parts of you that are just like like the fear. But I think I really felt that on like a somatic level last year. I think I'd done that before, but I think obviously because I was utterly cracked open last year, I really had to face that on like a deeper level. And I'm like, okay, this is what it feels like to really acknowledge all of your parts, and to try to be loving towards those parts, even if in the moment it feels really shameful, or it feels really uncomfortable to like acknowledge that part of self. So I think that was my other biggest reflection, is like the shame, the patience piece, and how important that is in healing work. And then I think one of the other things as well is just like building the capacity to step into the void, again, everything I'm talking about wouldn't have been possible without nervous system work, somatic work, like, so the undertones of all of this is like doing that work, but these are just like the gifts that they've like given me. So if I could tell Lydia last year, you know, this is what I would be saying, is like that courage to step into the unknown, because how I feel now is like I feel so happy and so content, and like even on days where it's not quote unquote a happy day, even if I feel, I don't know, just a bit meh, or you know, like I am having a day where I'm like, I wish I had a partner and I wish I had someone I could be with, for example, I'm just like really okay with that, you know, and like I'm just really content. Like it doesn't have to be either or, like it can be an and in the middle of that, you know, like I'm so happy being single, and I would really love to have, like I'm so ready to have that safe masculine man in my life who like respects me and loves me and makes me feel safe. Like I'm so ready for that, like I feel it in my body, but I'm also so happy being single, right? So like you see, you get to hold the duality almost. So I think, yeah, that was a lesson for me last year, is like just finding the faith to just keep going and stepping into the void. And when that feels like, we can talk about that, right? But when, and it kind of links to the first one, when that feels unsafe in your body, its primal instincts kick in, and you are going to do fucking everything to run away from that. Everything. And it is going to feel so unsafe. Last year, it felt so unsafe for me. I remember I got the keys to this flat and I sat here and I felt sad. I felt so sad and I felt scared as shit. I was like, I'm living on my own. I don't want to live on my own. I've never lived like on my own before, and this feels terrifying for me, and this doesn't feel like a thing that I actually want to celebrate. That didn't last long, thankfully, but it was stepping into the unknown, right? And last year, because the rate at which I was growing and evolving, it was like one shit, like boom, 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 like one thing after another was shifting. Like my career, who I was as a woman, like the whole piece around the breakup, like the trauma, like everything was just one thing after another. And I also realised as well, there was so much stuff I hadn't processed from like the years before that. So it was all hitting me at once. And then as it was hitting me and as I was working through it, it was like all coming up in my nervous system, how unsafe it felt, all kind of like in my body somatically, like all of these parts being triggered and activated. Like it was fucking intense at times, just kind of like the involvement. But I think this again is why it feels like an initiation for me, because like the unfolding was just like, and the breadcrumbs and the synchronicities and how like held I was like by like the universe, like just the feeling that I had, that it was just so much bigger than me. I've never felt that, even though it was so painful, I've never felt flow like it before in my life from last year. And I think that just goes to show that like I made the decisions I was making were the right decisions for me, no matter how scary they felt. And I think it's that's my, linking it back to my third reflection, is when you feel like something, you're stepping into the void of the unknown, right? It's like, please just keep going with that, because if you're doing the right level of work, when you're stepping into the unknown, you should also be creating new anchors of safety in your nervous system. So you're not just kind of stepping into the void, all this shit's being unearthed, feels really unsafe, and then you're kind of like left, right? So like, again, holding that duality of, okay, this feels unsafe, but there's this that feels safe for me, or I'm working towards making this feel safe now. So that unknown that you're stepping into, like somatically, nervous system level, it's really unsafe. But I just want to say, it's like, if you're feeling like whatever you're doing right now, it's causing you suffering, please do not give up on taking action or making decisions to change your reality, because you have the capacity to do that. Like, I promise you, you have the capacity to do that. If you're in a relationship now and you feel like someone's not meeting your needs, they make you feel like shit, they're disrespecting you, you know, they're not treating you the way that you want to be treated, I know it can be terrifying at the thought of leaving that. I know, because I hear so many women say it in sessions with me, I feel like I'm never going to find anyone. I spent last year being terrified that I was never going to find anybody, because I had been made to believe that I was too much all of the time. And I just think, like, thank fuck, whatever strength I found at various points, like, thank God I found that, because the way life has met me in making that decision and those decisions, and even last year to keep going, has been profound. And often we don't know what's going to be on the other side of making these decisions. So again, using the example, if it is that relationship, or if it's a job, or even if it's where you live, or how you feel about yourself, or trauma you've experienced, or how you're behaving, how you're acting, how you feel, just things that you notice, whatever it is. I just used the relationship as an example. Whatever it is, know that you have the power to change that. And if you are unhappy, changing that, whatever you're unhappy with, life will meet you and support you on the other side of it, and you will find peace and happiness in the smallest of things that make you wonder why the fuck you stayed suffering for so long. Like, honestly, when you do this work and you really start to get this relationship with yourself, like today for example, I have had a phenomenal day. I've woke up, I've gone to dance, I've been around women, I then decided to walk home. I got myself a chocolate croissant, a coffee. I strolled back home from Liverpool. I found a little market. I got some homemade chicken dumplings. I got some goat curry. I've never had goat curry in my life, but like this little market, I just stumbled upon it. And I would never have found that if I never walked home. And these local people, like these lovely local people who have different experiences and different cultures to me, I just prepared this food, this homemade food, and cooked it and was selling it. And I was like, oh my, yes, I want to buy it. Like honestly, I could have cried. And I was just in the sunshine, walking back home with my stupid silly little dumplings in my hand with garlic soya sauce on them, and I was smiling like I just won the lottery. And I was like, this level of happiness I struggled to find. Like, I thought I was happy. No, this is happiness, like what I feel now. The level of like inner peace that I feel, because I don't low level feel unsafe for anything. I've not self-abandoned. I'm not kind of keeping my mouth shut. I am not self-sacrificing. I'm not any, and you fill that in with you, right? Like, I'm not, I don't know, getting up and going to work and hating it, whatever it might be for you. And this peace, fucking priceless. And I know that this peace that I feel now, no one is disturbing that. Like, it's not even peace, right? It's like safety and security. Nobody's disturbing that. So this is something I was speaking about with Matt. It's like, when you get to the other side and you've done the work for yourself and you really know what you want and you want your life to look like, and you believe that your life can look like that, then you want to bring someone in, or you want to bring like a job in, or you want to make moves that are going to support where you're at, right? And that's how I feel right now. So like, I'm so happy in the sunshine, walking through the park with my dumplings and my homemade curried goat in my bag. Like, there's nothing else today that I need. No, and I'm coming back home to my space. I'm going to put my heating on. I've got my cat, like who I love more than anything in the world. I've got a crisp glass of Savion in the fridge, cooling off. Like, tell me that's not 10 out of 10. Like, peace and happiness and security, right? There's money in the bank, there's food in my fridge, and I've done all that for me. And also, I've not done that from a place of struggle, hustle, complete fucking stress, burnout. Like, I've done that from a space of like really, really doing the work to create this life that feels so loving for me. Like, I'm not coming home to a scenario where like I don't feel like I can be myself, or I just don't feel like I can say what I need to say, or just any of that shit, you know, like it's so profound. So that is my third lesson. Like, just please do not give up faith and hope to know that if you are suffering now, like, you don't have to stay where you are. Like, and when you make that decision to move through that, it's worth it. Honestly, it's so worth it. And there's going to be things that you can't even imagine that are going to make your heart crack open with gratitude. Like today, for example. Like, I could never think that homemade dumplings that I got in a street in the middle of Toxteth would give me a sense that I just won £1 million and be that like happy and content. And here I am. Like, so that's my third lesson, or my third reflection. And I think if Lydia in 2024 knew that, like, that would just give her so much ease and give her so much permission to not resist as much what was unfolding and the way that life was taking her. And yeah, just give it a little bit more faith that like it's going to be better, and you just need to get to the other side of it to realise how unhappy you were and how much you were suffering and how much you were self-sacrificing. And that is not just like, I'm talking about anything here, right? Like, I'm even talking about jobs. So like, when I decided to leave being a child therapist, it's like that was making me unhappy. It was stressing me out and making me dysregulated. Going to work in the car, commuting sometimes over an hour to get to a job, being on a wage that was just like, I've studied so hard and I spent so much money, and this money that's coming in, it goes nowhere. Like, I don't feel creative, I don't feel expansive, I don't feel in control of my life, like, going to this job. So whether you choose to stay in employment, it's like, if you hate the job that you're in now, it's like, know that you can make a choice to change that job and you'll feel so much happier, right? So yes, they are my lessons. And I think whatever kind of choice or decisions or actions you make, it's like there's something on the other side of that. And it kind of links to the patience one as well, because I didn't know how long it was going to take me to start to get to the other side of it. And I think sometimes, or if you're listening to this, there might be harder kind of obstacles that you overcome, and it's just knowing like that patience, if you're chipping away, like, it's going to pay off, right? And like, things are going to start to shift and things will kind of come to fruition for you in like a time that's okay for you. Can like depend on what block you're overcoming, depends on what trauma you're healing, you know, because there's so many different levels and types of trauma, and you know, depending on the pace of your journey, like, everybody is different. This is not about comparing your journey to anybody else's. This is just about letting you know that there's another reality on the other side of suffering or self-abandoning or just like being unhappy in general with things that like, don't feel good for you. So on that note, I'm going to end the podcast. Even when I try to do really short podcast episodes, how this is still being 52 minutes, I don't know. And I've completely free talked this episode, as I always do. So God knows what I've said in it. Hopefully it makes sense. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you've made it to the end of this podcast episode, you're a champ. And if you've got any takeaways from it, feel free to, you know, share them on Instagram with me. It would mean a lot. Or tag this episode, put it on your story, share the podcast. If this episode resonated and you think other women would get a lot from it. And yes, thank you for being here. And if you are interested in doing some of this kind of deep work with me, then you can head to my website, link is below, or you can drop me a message on Instagram. Again, links are all below. So thank you so much for being here. Enjoy enjoy the rest of your week, and I shall be back next week with another podcast episode.